Motivation is bullshit. And before you click away thinking, aren't you supposed to be some kind of coach that's going to motivate me? I want you to stick with me because this might actually change the way that you approach your goals forever.
Welcome to the Success Blueprint Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship and success. Join us in uncovering the stories behind the triumphs, challenges, and invaluable lessons learned by today's most inspiring entrepreneurs.
Have you ever had one of those mornings where you set your alarm for 5 a.m. because somewhere on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, you saw a post about someone saying that successful people wake up every morning before the sunrise? And then your alarm goes off. And you might hit snooze. And then you might hit snooze again. And then maybe again. Yeah. And that's because I know I've been there too. So let's talk about it, because I'm going to say something that's a little bit controversial. That's motivation is bullshit. And before you click away thinking, aren't you supposed to be some kind of coach that's going to motivate me? I want you to stick with me, because this might actually change the way that you approach your goals forever. If you're anything like me, motivation tends to be highly unpredictable, and it always hits at the worst time. And almost every single time. And it's times like when you're laying in bed and you're already having trouble sleeping and you're doing your mental rehearsal of everything that is on your to-do list that has been haunting you as a business owner. And then you're laying there and you're planning out your next day about how it's going to be productive and you're going to get everything on that bloody list done. You start to feel good and you kind of finally fall asleep. And then bam, your alarm goes off. And you're exhausted from the night of the adrenaline rush and the lack of sleep. And all you want to do is go back to sleep. You see, motivation isn't actually the problem. The problem is your purpose. Now, I've had countless clients over the years, brilliant entrepreneurs, hustlers, people with huge dreams. And one thing that I have learned is that motivation will fail you every single time. Now, let me tell you about a client that I have. Sarah is a client that came to me. She runs a marketing firm, and she came to me because she was feeling really burnt out. She had started off really motivated, like most of us do when we start a new business, excited. And she was ready to conquer the world, to build her business, to crush her goals. But after a few months of 14-hour workdays, which you know what I'm talking about, she kind of fizzled out. And what kept her going was not the motivation. It was actually her purpose. When we dug deep into uncovering what her real why was, why she actually started her business, it was like it reignited the fire. You see, the reason why she started her business in the first place wasn't anything to do with money or success. It was actually about creating a company that gave other small businesses a voice. That was her purpose. It was simple. So this is where I want to ask you something. What's your purpose? Why are you really doing what you're doing? I want you to forget about staying motivated every day. What I want you to do is I want you to focus on connecting to your purpose. Now, knowing what your purpose is just the start. You've got to see it. And when I say see it, I mean like you really have to see it. So here's one of my favorite little NLP tricks that I like to give my clients. And it works like absolute magic. What you're going to do is you're going to vividly visualize the outcome of your goals. And I'm not talking about some kind of fluffy close your eyes and dream. I want you to actually engage your senses. And what I mean by that is I want you to feel it. I want you to smell it. I want you to hear it. And not like that midnight visual that I just mentioned. With this visual exercise, you need to actually be purposeful, be awake and fully engaged so that you remember it and that it gives those micro neurons in your brain a chance to make new neural pathways. You see, when you visualize something in your brain doesn't know that it's not real yet. So it starts making strategies and investing in you, bringing your vision into reality. So I want you to engage all of your senses when you think about your goals. It makes your outcome a lot more compelling because when it feels real, it becomes something that you can chase with clarity. Now, here's the thing. It's really easy to get overwhelmed by the big picture. I'm sure that you've felt it before. You've probably had a massive vision like I have, but when you start thinking about the how you're going to get there, suddenly you are doing anything to distract yourself, like Netflix binging instead of actually getting to work. And that's why we need to actually break it down into small, manageable steps. So I had a client and his name was Elias, and he was trying to launch a new online business. It's a really great business, and he was really focused on that end result, which was starting to paralyze him because the size and scope of the project was massive. So what I did was I gave him a simple piece of advice. Stop thinking about launching the business. Start thinking about just finishing that damn prototype. You see, we went ahead and we broke his goals down into the bite-sized tasks, the monthly, the weekly, the daily tasks. And you'd be amazed at how quickly he started making progress. It's like when you're climbing a mountain. You've probably heard this. You don't focus on the peak, you focus on the next step, those small little wins. And those are what keep you going. Now, I want to move on to one of my favorite NLP hacks, which is anchoring. And this is like a secret little weapon for staying in the game. I want to ask, have you ever had a moment where you feel like you've been on absolute fire? Maybe you nailed a presentation, you closed a big deal, or you hit the gym and felt invincible. Now, as you're thinking about that, what if I told you that you could actually bottle up that feeling and use it anytime that you want? You see, with anchoring, you can. And anchoring is something that I actually began doing myself far before I knew anything about neurolinguistic programming. You see, I grew up dancing competitively since I was about 5 years old. And I actually remember my mom one day telling me that if I wanted to have energy when I'm dancing, there's energy points behind your ears. And if I wanted to boost my energy right before I hit the stage, all I had to do was push on them back here. Now, that actually became part of my prep ritual every time that I was getting on the stage. And even to this day, if I touch back there, I get this feeling of energy flowing through my body. Now, knowing how powerful anchoring can be in influencing your state, it's a tool I use with every one of my clients. I work with an entrepreneur, Alice, who was always really, really confident when she was pitching her investors, but the rest of the time she kind of suffered from a lot of self-doubt and limiting beliefs. So what I did was I taught her to anchor that feeling of confidence that she was getting during her pitching and bring it into the areas of her life where she was starting to feel that lack of consciousness. And anytime she felt shaky, all she had to do was tap into that anchor and boom, instantly a boost. So here's how you're going to do it. I want you to think of a moment when you felt absolutely unstoppable. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about recalling every detail, the sounds, the emotions, recalling the environment. I even want you to focus on the taste and the smell that you might have had. And I want you to then tie that feeling to a physical gesture, like a squeeze of your fist, a touch of your wrist. And as you're feeling it, I want you to practice that embrace and keep doing that. And the next time that you need a little jolt of motivation, use that gesture for energy and feel it coming flooding back. However, a word of advice, don't pick a big gesture like this because you'll need to be mindful where you're using it. You don't want to do that in front of somebody and them get the wrong idea. So think of a gesture that maybe is a little bit smaller that you can do anywhere. Now, there's always going to be mornings where your alarm's going to go off and instead of getting up, you're going to feel like kind of chucking it down and chucking the phone down and laying in bed and staying there. That's okay because we ebb and flow, and as entrepreneurs, it's a hard job that we have. But one of the things that you need to do is a little bit of self-compassion. And I'm not talking like a woo-woo concept. This is an actual strategy. And this is something I've had to practice firsthand. As many of my followers will know, I unexpectedly lost my dad and then my dog very shortly after. And it was devastating. But as an entrepreneur, business couldn't stop. And even though I was grieving, I had to keep pushing forward. And I had these massive goals that I was working towards at the time. Now, every day was and still is an emotional roller coaster, and it was hard to stay focused and to push through. So naturally, I was falling behind, and I started to beat myself up pretty hard whenever I'd miss the target. But what I did was I started to practice a little bit of self-compassion because my motivation was getting crushed. And I did that because a friend reminded me to cut myself some slack. And you see, progress isn't linear. So I refocused on celebrating the wins, even the tiniest of little ones, and I stopped acting like I needed to be a machine. That's when I realized that motivation's going to fluctuate. So instead of beating yourself up when you fall short, you should also practice some self-compassion because trust me, being kind to yourself will get you a lot further than being your own worst critic. Motivation, it's fleeting, and you really can't rely on it. But when you're connected with your purpose, when you visualize your outcomes vividly, when you're breaking your goals into bite-sized incremental steps, anchoring your best feeling, and practicing a little bit of self-compassion, you don't need motivation. Because you've got purpose, you've got momentum, and that's what's really going to carry you forward. So stop waiting to feel motivated and start making the moves because that's what's going to get you to where you want to go. And hey, if you need a little kick in the pants along the way, I'm always here to help you because motivation is bullshit, but you've got this.